Well, welcome once again. Tonight, the topic is once again taking refuge. And it's a really wonderful topic, wonderful readings. Did anyone here have the chance to do the readings from the Profound Treasury? Okay, yeah. I really recommend it, especially if you're planning on taking refuge. I think it'd be a big help. And they're just terrific. So, the refuge vow. This is a formal ceremony. It's sort of the Buddhist analog for confirmation in the Christian tradition, or bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah in the Jewish tradition. It means that you're sort of committing yourself to this particular path as a way of working on yourself, that you have shopped around, you've looked at other possibilities, and you've decided that this is the way that speaks most powerfully or importantly to you, and that you're going to stop shopping and you're going to devote yourself to sort of, instead of digging a few shallow holes, you're going to dig one deeper one. And go deeper with this practice. So, by taking refuge, you really, if you want to call yourself a Buddhist, anyone can, doesn't matter. But certainly after you take refuge, then you can say, I'm a Buddhist. And that said, we're not joining a club. This isn't some sort of a protective identity that we're assuming. Like we're going to be a member of this very elite, select family. It's really not about that. It's about making a commitment to oneself. And really what the commitment is to waking up. To waking up from the anxious, fear-driven dreams that we have about the past and the future, which are just that. They're fictions, they're dreams, they're stories we tell ourselves. And waking up to the brilliance and the life and importance of what is arising now, in the present, here. Because this is what's real. It's beyond words. Words are just labels. Or as in Tibetan, the word for concepts is tags. I mean, it's namdak, which means tag. It's as though, you've got a cushion on the floor there, and you take a tag and you write the word cushion, and you scotch tape it to the actual cushion. The word is just a word. The cushion is a reality. It's alive. It's vibrant. You can touch it. It has all these different modulations of color and texture. It would take you forever to accurately describe it. But we just sum it up with the one word, cushion. And we sort of affix it to that. So, when you take refuge, what you're doing is you're switching your allegiance. And in the traditional lingo, we say you're switching your allegiance from samsara is confusion and suffering, to nirvana. Nirvana means the absence of confusion and suffering. Really what you're switching your allegiance to is awake from dreams. The dreams have this very nasty, dark quality to them. They can. In the Shambhala teachings, we call them cocoon, because when we're lost in dream, it's as though we're wrapped in a cocoon of thought, of web, of dream. And that cocoon sort of filters out the brilliance of the world. It's like it filters the light, and it changes the colors and makes the colors more muted, literally, as well as figuratively. And also, inside the cocoon, which is the web of our thoughts, it's somewhat smelly. It's the smell of me, as though you were sort of smelling your own armpit. And it's familiar, and it's kind of friendly, but it's also kind of stinky. That smell of those repetitive, anxious worries, fears, angers, hatreds, desires, all those things. So really what we're doing when we take refuge is we are making a vow that we intend, that it is our intention to switch our allegiance to awake in this present moment. And awake is fresh. It's full of light. It's full of clear seeing and certainty. A lot of certainty and freedom. But we have to give up these habitual patterns. And that might be a bit challenging because they're so habitual. And because there's some part of us that believes that we really need them in some way. So that's the path, really, is making that switch. Trungpa Rinpoche says, you're leaving your home country and you are opening yourself up, jumping into new territory, which isn't actually a territory, but a wasteland, completely open ground here. And then he says, it means you must give up your individual preoccupations and obsessions. This is a tough one, huh? The personal favoritisms that maintain your existence. That is the true definition of humility. Humility is to give up, these obsessions that we have about that define us. I'm the kind of person who likes this and doesn't like that. So you take refuge with your body, speech, and mind. And by the way, in Buddhist physiognomy, your body is here. So when you take refuge and you touch your forehead, it's in the head. Speech is in the throat. That makes sense. Mind is here in the chest, because this is the location of the Hridaya, or that's the Sanskrit word. And I'm not sure what the Tibetan would be for Hridaya, but another word for it is Chitta, which is translated as mind or heart. And it's located here. And you take your refuge with your body, speech, and mind, which means with everything you've got. Absolutely. In the Buddha, as an example of someone who trod the path, an ordinary human being who achieved awakening, and he's the example that we can do it too. It's really quite inspiring. He's not some god, some superhuman person. He was a human being just like us. And the Dharma, which is the teachings, that's the second thing one takes refuge in. They define the path, the way in which we go from samsara to nirvana, the way in which we work on ourselves, the tools we have, the understandings we develop. And then the Sangha is our community of, how does he put it? Sangha is companionship. And really, when you make this kind of a commitment, and you take the Buddha as the example and the Dharma as the path, then the idea of the Sangha as dharmic companionship becomes very natural and inspiring. Your Dharma friends, your Dharma brothers and sisters, because you share this common understanding of the Buddha and the Dharma. And it's quite inspiring and supportive. And there's a preceptor, the person who gives you the vows, And that person inspires trust. And really that person is just a spokesman for the whole lineage of people who have taken the vows before all of us, going back in time to the Buddha. He passed from one person to the next all the way down. And some of those people were ordinary people just like us. Some of them were less ordinary. They might be great teachers. But also the essence of what it means to be a great teacher is to be a completely ordinary person. Usually what characterizes a rather poor practitioner is that they want to be extraordinary. And Rinpoche says, your trust in the preceptor is the kind of trust you might have in a school teacher, a good school teacher, someone you actually feel an affection or an affinity and trust for. And the reason we take refuge in the Buddha as well, as an example of someone who trod the path, he's an example of someone who gave up materialism. And materialism means self-aggrandizement. And there are different kinds of materialism. There's the materialism of form, where we manipulate the world of things. And the most common form of that materialism is the acquisition of money, as though money would make us happy. But it could be all kinds of things. You could just be the way you would decorate your house, or if you cling to it neurotically, then you're manipulating form in a way that is meant to bolster me, so that when people come into your house, they say, oh, this person has wonderful taste, and you could swell up with pride, perhaps. Or, there are people back in the 60s, remember there was a slogan, don't own more than you can fit in your VW Bug. And that could become a kind of materialism too, like I'm going to make my life so simple, and I'm going to go live in the woods, be like Thoreau and live in Walden, by the sound of running water in a cabin. And that could be a form of materialism too, because you're manipulating the physical environment in order to build oneself up. I. And then there's the materialism of speech, which has to do with subscribing to particular ideas, which give you the feeling that I'm on the side of right. And now I'm safe because I'm on the side of right. You might be a Republican, you might be a communist, you might be a socialist, you might be a Buddhist, you could be a Christian, and you're subscribing to a set of a dogma, an ideology. And by doing that, you feel that you're safe and secure. And then you go further and you organize your life according to those ideas. And people who don't subscribe to those ideas are seen as less than, outside your circle. So it's very exclusive. And it's another way of building up this sense of I, of ego. And again, this is what the Buddha let go of, eschewed, dropped. And finally, there's the materialism of mind, which has to do with spirituality, really. And it has to do with feeling that I'm going to be a good person. I'm going to be a holy person by subscribing to this particular philosophy and these particular practices. And it can get very, very ethereal, the spiritual materialism. It might be that you practice mental practices, forms of meditation that calm the mind and produce feelings of happiness or even bliss. These are trance states, states of concentration, where you focus the mind one pointedly on an object. It takes a lot of work to achieve those states. But they're achievable, and yet they are, like everything else that is created, temporary, subject to decay. And they also have to do with me, just me. There's no compassion in these states. There's no giving out. Sometimes you might subscribe to a philosophy, a spiritual philosophy of compassion. And then people who do that and do it in the wrong way feel that they are holy, they are virtuous, and people who are outside that circle are lost, are, what's the word, profane. So the Buddha is an example of someone who gave up all that materialism, that ego-centered self-clinging. And then Trungpa Rinpoche says, we are giving up any gods that might have been a part of our life. We are freeing ourselves from the idea of trying to please an external agent. There is no need for worship. Wow. Is that radical? Should I read that again? I mean, he says, we are giving up any gods. There are all kinds of gods. There are the gods of success. There are the gods of spirituality. There are the gods who teach us how to be athletes. All kinds of gods that we worship. There are the gods of art. And we would wish we could be as creative as them. We see them create their art and we feel less than. We're giving up all those gods, all those external standards and dictators. We are freeing ourselves from the idea of trying to please an external agent. There is no need for worship. I remember being at a poetry reading in about 1973 that a friend of mine organized in Boulder. And the readers were Trungpa Rinpoche, Allen Ginsberg, Gary Snyder, Robert Bly, and a utopian poet named Nanao Sakaki. And I remember sitting there listening to Gary Snyder reading and feeling so less than, you know. And then Trungpa Rinpoche did something at the end that just blew it to pieces. And I'm not going to give you the story now, but another time. Something to look forward to. It was really amazing. But I know I and all the audience were sitting here thinking, oh, gosh, he is so terrific. I could never be like that. You know, what a hero. He says, we are capable. Listen to this. We are capable of becoming pure and absolutely awake. And by pure, he means giving up this kind of right and wrong, judging ourselves and judging the external world. That's why you don't judge your thoughts. If you have thoughts, you don't sit there and say, oh, I'm a bad meditator. Give that up. It's a waste of time. Worse than a waste of time. In our case, this may not last more than a minute, this waking up. That's encouraging, and yet we're still on the path. It could just be like a little pop, of awake. Or more than a second, but we are still trying. We are trying to attain Buddhahood and to understand that state of mind which is very open, fantastic, and utterly powerful. With that state of mind, we could be gone beyond. This is a reference to the Heart Sutra, or to the whole idea of Tathagata. Tathagata is another epithet for the Buddha, and it means the one who has gone beyond. Gone beyond what? Gone beyond good and bad. Gone beyond this and that, high and low. Just gone beyond it all. And beyond, but still keep with our daily life, still cook our little pot of tea. So we take refuge in the Dharma as the path, and we find tremendous truth in it. He says this, by practicing meditation, you can overcome the crudest level of misery and anxiety. You become somewhat tamed, matured, weathered, and you have a taste of liberation. That coming into the present every time gives a little taste of liberation, of freedom. You realize that if you go further, you are perfectly certain of overcoming the whole perpetually vicious cycle of samsara altogether. You are virtually certain if you keep to the path. And then he talks about the Dharma is known as passionless. And the reason for that, you see, is that the very essence of suffering is desire. We want things to be different than they are. We have this imagining in which we imagine a better way to be, or we imagine that we are less than somehow. That's in our thoughts. And the Dharma is giving that up. It's giving up that wantingness of wanting things to be better, giving up self-improvement, giving up improvement of other, giving up that kind of criticism which implies a wantingness. So the Dharma is passionless. Taking refuge in the Dharma means giving up your individual intellectual and metaphysical speculations. What a relief. Yeah, you don't have to speculate on all that stuff anymore. You're giving up your intellectual point of view. And he says the Dharma, actually, of the three jewels, Dharma, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the Dharma comes first. And on your shrine, actually, the Dharma should have a higher place than a statue of the Buddha. If you have a shrine at home, the Dharma, because the book, you use a book to represent the Dharma, and you give it the utmost respect. And then finally, we take refuge in the Sangha as companionship. And he defines that as being, an easy definition is monks and nuns, but also lay people who have taken refuge are our Sangha. And or people who have taken any of the five, or the first three of the 5 vows. The 5 vows are not to kill, not to take what isn't yours, to steal, not to lie, not to have improper sex, whatever that is anymore. And the final one is not to drink intoxicants. Now, if you take those vows, you would take them every day. And if you plan to break one of them, like you're going to kill your enemy today, or you're going to drink alcohol or something, then you just don't take it that day, so then you don't break the vow. I'm joking about the killing part. I feel like I should say that. He says, when we understand the Buddha as an example, the Dharma as path, then understanding the Sangha as companionship happens naturally. It's really inspiring. You're accepting your Dharma brothers and sisters as true friends. And you're taking refuge in the Sangha as a community of practitioners who stand on their own 2 feet. It is based on individual dignity. Since nobody is leaning on you, if you fall down, only you fall down. So you do not create chaos. And someone can reach down and pick you up. They don't go down with you because they weren't leaning on you. That's the way Sangha works. It's Arya Sangha, noble Sangha. That's what Arya means. And it is free from theism. Theism is the idea of an external agent, an external authority to whom we have to bow, kowtow, obey, to whom we look for approval. That's what really theism is all about, is looking to an external authority for approval. It's very lonely that way. There is no external authority, none whatsoever. It's all up to each one of us. He says, to be a good member of the Sangha, the fundamental requirement is that you have a quality of softness and genuineness, which comes along, I might say, with just being present. The more one comes present and develops confidence in the well-being of this present moment contains enormous well-being compared to the anxiety and fear and unhappiness of our thoughts. When we come back and rest in this moment, it gives us protection. It's called mind protection, resting in the present moment. And so it makes us softer as individuals. And then he says, and those who have taken refuge are connecting with a kind of karmic elegance, or dharmic elegance. Dharmic elegance. And by that what he's referring to is that when we become very aware of ourselves and others in the present moment, then our words, our speech, our motions, our actions are lit, are informed by our awareness. And that brings them a kind of elegance. We're not sloppy. We're not mindless. We're here. We're informing all of our actions. He says, this is the end, authentic brilliance and goodness exist within you always. Always. They're here waiting in this awareness of the present. Once we come back from thought, authentic brilliance and goodness are here. They're part of us, always there. So when you take refuge in the three jewels, you become part of the noble Sangha because of what you are truly in your basic nature. And what you are is brilliance and richness. That is the point of taking the refuge vow. What could be more beautiful? So we could have a discussion if you like. Carrie.
So when you're talking about taking refuge in the Buddha, I typically, think of it as what you mentioned, both, you're sort of recognizing that the Buddha was a person that sort of achieved this state of awareness, and that also that you're sort of committing to the Buddha Dharma as well. I mean, the Buddha nature, right? Would you say that when people in this tradition take refuge in the Buddha, are there other aspects of that, sort of other than the Buddha as an example, and then also the fact that our nature is Buddha?
Well, I mean, the example isn't out there. It's not like we're going to look at that example and say, oh, I want to copy that. But rather what the Buddha is an example of is how we can find our own egolessness, the freedom from materialism, from self-aggrandizement. That's what materialism means, right? Egotism. And the way in which we free ourselves from egotism, as the Buddha did, is by coming back to the present moment. So we are looking at the Buddha as an example, but he's an example of what we can do inside ourselves. He just demonstrated it for us. And then we have to actually do it. It's live in us. So it's not like we're copying this example outside, It's like you're a bodybuilder and you see this example of a really terrific bodybuilder like Arnold Schwarzenegger or something. And you're going to say, well, I want muscles like him, and you compare your muscles to him as you build yourself up. It's not like that. It's rather that we're finding our own freedom from materialism, from egotism, from thoughts of self by doing this practice and coming inside. Yeah.
Thanks.
I knew you knew that anyhow. You just gave me the chance to say it. Yeah. Set up.
I found really interesting, and I think I had heard this before, of him talking about becoming a refugee and sort of giving up the borders, the boundaries that you're used to clinging to. So I wonder if you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, what we're becoming a refugee from is samsara, the suffering, the horror of samsara, confusion, egotism. It's full of monstrous crime at its worst, and suffering and anxiety at its least, And so we're becoming a refugee from the war zone, of that has raged in our minds, in one degree or another. Some people it might be it's a teeny little battle. Other people it might be a huge cataclysmic war. And we're becoming a refugee from that, yes. Really, when we come into the present moment, we are finding sanctuary in sanity. In sanity. Within it. That makes is that everybody's understanding of what it means when he says to be a refugee? This is a really powerful idea, because when we hear refugee, we think, oh, I'm going for refuge. Somebody's going to protect me and take care of me. And that isn't it at all. We're seeking refuge. I keep thinking about Trump. Oh, God. When I think of sanity and insanity and hatred and conflict and battling and war. We're a refuge. We're refugees from that into this open space of sanity, full of elegance. I keep thinking of Trungpa Rinpoche, for those of you who might have seen movies of him or even known him. Rochelle knew him. That when he smoked a cigarette, everybody smoked back in those days, right? And his hands were so elegant, the way he moved, so conscious and slowly, and all the time. There's a feeling of elegance in awareness.
So maybe it would be a wonderful thing to have Discovering Elegance as a film, the film's Discovering Elegance, that we can use here.
We, as a film, we should show Discovering Elegance.
What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be great. Sasha is referring to a film that was made of Trungpa Rinpoche creating art, and it was called Discovering Elegance. He also, this was hilarious, he went from Tibet to India, where they speak sort of Indian English, right, with an English tonality to it. And then he went from England, he got a fellowship to go to Oxford, on a Spalding Fellowship. And he went and became a student in England at Oxford. And founded, he and another Lama founded this meditation center in Scotland. And then he came to the United States. So his English was kind of Tibeto-Oxonian, and American. He loved American idiom. He was one of those people who just loved language. And he loved to play with it. And he then got some of his students, and in the sense of discovering elegance with language, they had classes in diction, Oxonian English. They were called elocution classes. Now, his sister-in-law, Tessa, went to those classes. She called them electrocution classes. She was English, and she spoke that way naturally. And she hated those classes. But people would say things, the rain, I can't do it, the rain in Spain falls mainly in the plain, with an Oxonian accent, So, but he wanted people to be conscious of every aspect of their being. Yeah.
So, I'm glad that we started with Tonglen, because I found it useful in working with someone who's close to me and also a member of the Sangha who's struggling right now, not with sickness, but with mental klesha, fear, anxiety, a lot of suffering of change going on right now.
Who is?
A friend,
Okay.
a member of the Sangha as well.
Okay.
And I'm finding it hard to help them and maintain skillful means, I think, because while on some level they're aware of a lot of the Buddhist teachings, he seems to be forgetting a lot of that right now. And I find myself trying to remind him in ways, and at the same time, the space is so tight right now that it's hard for them to see. And I'm finding myself losing patience sometimes, and actually shunning him a little bit, or stepping away, almost like a strategic retreat kind of thing. And you had mentioned in the refuge, the Dharma, taking refuge in the Sangha. I'm sorry. When you fall, but you don't bring anyone else down with you, or something like that. And I feel like maybe I'm allowing the situation to pull me out of compassion, because I'm getting impatient or frustrated, or that kind of thing. And I guess I think I know intuitively what to do. I have to maintain an open heart and still be compassionate, but I'm having a hard time. I'm struggling with it.
Well, if I may say, you're having a hard time comes from frustration of wanting to fix the other person. And that's not your job. You can't fix that other person. You can help a little bit when it's appropriate, but the most a person can do for another is to be there for them with openness, confidence, love, good cheer. Good cheer goes a long way. And you can, help that person. But if you get caught up in trying to fix them, then you will suffer the feeling of failure on your own part, and they will feel criticized. They'll feel less than. Because when you treat someone as though they need to be fixed, you're telling them you're broken. And really what you need to be doing is appreciating them, waiting, being there for them, to help them come forward in their better self, And being cheerful helps a lot with that.
Can I just add a little bit to it, and I'll move on?
So
one of the things this person is saying to me is, I'm a loser. And so it's like, I'm trying to say, no, you're not. You're not. Like, these are circumstances right now that will pass. Things will get better. I'm trying to say these. Maybe they won't get better, but so I guess I'm trying to lift them up, and they're not wanting to, and then so I guess I'm still trying to fix them in that way. But I don't know what to do, except if stepping away feels cruel, but I feel like I'm feeling this hotness, this frustration. I wanted to shake this person,
Again, that hotness and frustration comes from wanting them to be fixed. And whether you do it or somebody else does it, you want them to be fixed. That's your trip. And that's what is so hard to give that up, but you've got to give that up. And it means taking a chance that this person is going to fail. This person is going to suffer terribly, But you'll be there for them for that, because you know that this person is fundamentally a wonderful person, a good person, a person with lots to offer, and that this is circumstantial. It's a combination of their mind and circumstance and all this, and that you love this person, you're there for them. You got to stop trying to fix them, Mike, because, it's going to make you miserable, and it's going to make them feel like a failure, because they won't be able to be what you want them to be. It's so hard. I've learned this a lot recently, because I have a friend, a very close friend, whose son is mentally ill, with a biological mental illness. Wonderful guy, in his 40s. And if you met him, you'd think, and he was in good shape, you'd think this is a wonderful person, full of humor and intelligence, real, very, very bright guy. And terribly sick. And what his mother, is basically, charged with taking him in and out of mental hospitals and being there for him when he comes out and helping him. And what she's discovered is that the most that she can do is take care of herself, to keep herself in good cheer, and to be that way for him, to give him that space. And then when she's cheerful and open and light around him, he can respond, he can open up, he can relax. and he can discover his own well-being. But he cycles because it's biological with him. And the most she can do is that, and that's it. Really does help him. But if she is full of angst, if she's full of worry for him, and it utterly wrecks her life, and it doesn't help him at all, it actually hurts him. So it's been a great lesson for me to be involved in this a little bit, to see someone who's very skillfully, actually, much more so than perhaps I could, in negotiating such a difficult situation. So I'm passing it on to you, in a way, just what I've learned watching and being a part of this. It's really, and it's a huge lesson for all of us, that the most that we can be for other people is to be awake, present, aware, cheerful. Isn't that hard sometimes? So hard to be cheerful. I just remember Trungpa Rinpoche looking out at us, and you will be sitting there, and he'd say, "Please cheer up, please cheer up." And I always wondered, why the heck is he talking about that, But it is such a... try this. When you're feeling really screwed up, and unhappy and anxious and down and depressed, make yourself smile. Make yourself walk around with a smile for at least 10 minutes. Like that, plaster on your face. And watch what it does to your mind. It's amazing. It can actually have a profound effect on your mind, just changing your expression on your face. Marie.
So when we're talking about taking refuge, so we're promising ourselves to achieve enlightenment and become awakened. So is that a process which we go through during our life, or is it a moment like in Buddha's life when he sat and he just awoke and he achieved alignment? So how is it happening?
Well, that's the old question, You're asking a question that people have asked for centuries. It's the question of whether enlightenment comes gradually through a long process or suddenly. And in the 8th century in Tibet, there was a debate that took place between a famous Indian Buddhist named Kamalashila and a Chinese Buddhist who was just called Hoshang Mahayana, is the way I remember his name. And it took place under the in the auspices of the court of the king. And these two debates, they debated, is it a gradual process or is it a sudden process? Because the Chinese were very into this Zen idea, what became Zen in Japan, of sudden enlightenment, like that. So I remember asking Trungpa Rinpoche, one of us did once, well, which is it, Is it gradual or is it sudden? And he said, it's a gradual path to sudden enlightenment. And then on another time he said, talking about the suddenness of it, because there is a sudden moment of aha. And there are moments of aha leading up to that too. Moments of discovery on the path, when you realize this actually makes sense. That's an aha. This is, it works for me. That's an aha. They're all little ones. He said of the big one, you can make of this what you want. He said, it's like a joke. You can only laugh once. Once you've heard the joke, you can't laugh at it again. Although I managed to laugh at jokes over and over again myself. But I get the logic, of what he was saying. So a gradual path to sudden enlightenment. But I think that that's really it. That there is perhaps a moment of a big shift, but there are lots of little moments that lead up to it.
So is it possible to achieve that enlightenment, the sudden one, in one life, or it's like...
Well, that's a big point. Again, you're asking really... I'll tell you, each tradition has something different to say about that, how many lives it takes to get to be enlightened. Now, the Vajrayana tradition of Tibet says, of course, each tradition is somewhat chauvinistic. It means they think theirs is the best, right? So the Vajrayana tradition of Tibet says, well, if you only practice the Hinayana teachings, which is what we're studying in the first volume of the Profound Treasury, except that Trungpa Rinpoche teaches the Hinayana it's really Vajrayana. But if you only study the Hinayana teachings, it'll take you many, 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 many lifetimes to achieve enlightenment. But eventually you will. The Mahayana teachings, if you practice them, and you become a bodhisattva, then you can do it much faster in a few lifetimes, maybe 2 or 3 or 4. And if you practice the Vajrayana, it's possible to do it in maybe 1 or 2 lifetimes if you'll practice the lower yanas. And if you practice Dzogchen, well, I read Tulku Ujin, who was a teacher who's dead now. His sons are out. Tsoknyi Rinpoche is one of his sons. And Mingyur Rinpoche, who teaches a lot about this stuff with Richard Davidson, about Mahamudra. But Richard Davidson is a neuroscientist. He teaches about the effects of meditation on the brain, neuroplasticity, and that sort of thing. And Mingyur and he do programs together. And Mingyur and Tsoknyi and 2 other fellows are both sons of Tulku Ujin. And in his book Rainbow Painting, Tulku Ujin says if you practice Dzogchen, which is the highest of all the tantric teachings, you can achieve, and you practice it diligently and properly, you can achieve enlightenment in 14 years. Huh? But you have to be really serious. And did he say that? Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's what he said. We can do it. So, yeah. Yes. Go for it. I want it for you, huh? Sarah. Wait a second. Pass the mic to Sarah.
Sorry. But taking refuge is not the only vow, right? There's other vows to come.
Oh, yeah.
So can you refresh my memory? Is it 3 main, or I don't know, or how many vows is it?
In the so-called Sutrayana, that's the Hinayana and the Mahayana, there are 2 vows that you consider taking. The first is refuge, which is what we're talking about tonight. And the second is the Bodhisattva vow. And that is the vow, and that what that vow is varies according to the way it's stated a little bit. It's either that you are simply going to help all other sentient beings, and they are infinite, right? Achieve enlightenment. Or you are vowing to help all other sentient beings achieve enlightenment before you. And I've seen it both ways. But you see, the main thrust of the Bodhisattva vow, and what it makes it possible for you to take it, is that you begin to realize that self-aggrandizement is not where it's at all. That's the path of misery and suffering. And that the path of enlightenment and happiness is in helping other people. And so when you take this vow, you're vowing to put other people, their welfare before yours. Because it makes sense. It finally makes sense that that's what you need to do. And when that begins to make sense that way, then you take the Bodhisattva vow. And initially, it's there are 2 aspects to taking the vow. One is that you're expressing your intention to help all other sentient beings achieve enlightenment. And the second one is that you actually do it. You actually act with awareness, with an enlightened aspect, to your mind and your actions. So there's the intention and there's the reality, 2 aspects of expressing that vow. So, and then beyond that, then we have tantric vows. And whenever you receive instructions on tantric practice, you will take one or more vows. The most common vow is the Samaya vow. Samaya, in Tibetan it means damsik, and literally means holy word, damsik. And what Samaya is that you are, it's really on a sort of first pass. What you're doing is expressing your loyalty to the teacher, to the teachings, and to secrecy, because usually it involves an oath of secrecy about what you're about to receive. But on a higher level, it means that you are vowing to unify your mind with the teachings. And there are different ways that this is done. But you will take, for every practice that you receive, and you might receive lots and lots of tantric practices, you will take vows. And the funny thing is, you get a different name every time, too. They're all secret, all these names, except for the first vow. You get a new name when you take refuge. You get a name, and that is not secret. In fact, some people use those names. I have Caucasian Dharma brothers and sisters who use their refuge names. Huh? Pema Chodron. Yeah, she's one. She's probably the most famous one. Huh? She's asking a loaded question here. Because you see, your refuge name is meant to show your potential. And you see, when I first met Trungpa Rinpoche, my neurosis manifested in speed. Speed is a way that you can, when you're anxious, you get speedy. People who do that, you make lists and you you check off the things on your list, you rush around. And he used to needle me all the time for being speedy. In fact, his nickname for me, no, I'm not going to do this on the recording. So, my refuge name is Shiwa Chidzin, peaceful Dharma holder. Shiwa means peace, Cha is Dharma, and Zin is to hold. Peaceful Dharma holder. In my better moments. So what names will you have? You've taken refuge, have you? What's your name, Carrie? Are we running out of battery?
Choki Gyalsto. I think something along the lines of Victoria's Banner of the Dharma or something.
Choki Gyatso?
Gyalsto.
Gyalsko.
Gyalsto.
Stow.
Choki Gyalsto.
Yeah, Choki means Dharma apostrophe S, Dharmas. Gyal is victorious, and then the last word I'm not getting.
Banner.
Yeah, so it's banner, victorious banner of Dharma, of the Dharma. Yeah, great name. Whoa.
What was the name of the? I always forget the name of the.
Oh, was it up at
it was
Westchester?
at Westchester Buddhist Center. I think it was the first time.
Lama Chunam.
Yeah.
Lama Chunam gave him that name. Yeah.
So so you said that in your case the name was chosen by what you was lacking and missing in your personality or character or whatever to.
That's theoretically, yeah. I mean,
okay.
It depends, on the perspicacity of the preceptor and how well the preceptor knows you, and their sense of humor. My names got funnier after that, but they're secret.
So it can be like without any specific reason, right?
It can be what? It's about your potential, really. And it's sort of seeing your what your potential is.
Okay.
And the preceptor chooses it, and gives it to you. The person who's giving you the vows. And you get it on a piece of paper, calligraphed, and you can take it home to remind you. Well, maybe we should end here. I don't see any more. So, we're just going to keep going for a while. And if you have any intention or you would like to take refuge vows, let Rochelle or me or Carrie know. And probably, since I'm going to be giving the vows, we should have a meeting and discuss it. And then we'll probably in some weeks hence have a ceremony and do vows. Oh, this is moving towards being bodhisattvas here. We're going to give away the merit. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.